In a previous video, I made some controversial statements about Medal of Honor Warfighter. After being bullied by my comment section, I decided to give it another chance. I have a difficult time playing sequels immediately after their predecessors because the little changes always stick out to me. If movement feels slightly different or a system was changed in a significant way, I focus on those things instead of focusing on the game itself. And that's where Warfighter lost me initially. After picking it back up, I realized I may have come to those conclusions hastily. Warfighter's campaign was developed in the Frostbite 2.0 engine, much like Battlefield 3 and 4, and the change in engine could be pretty jarring playing one right after the other. I've heard rumors that Danger Close was a year into developing Warfighter when they made the switch to Frostbite, but I can't really find any concrete evidence for that. There are some clips that were released on a WordPress site in 2015 from a company called Black Swan that shows conceptual UI elements as well as multiplayer gameplay. Some people have said that the gameplay segments look to be running in the Unreal Engine. Looking through some sources myself, it seems more likely that prototypes were built in Unreal Engine, but the majority of the actual development cycle took place at Frostbite. If there are any sources that prove this wrong, let me know in the comments, but that's the conclusion that I came to. Warfighter is Danger Close Games' second and final project, being released in October of 2012. The title puts you in the boots of several Tier 1 operators as the war in the Middle East rages on. Taking place a few years after the events of the first game, series regulars Mother, Preacher, Voodoo, and Dusty return in various roles. This game is littered with nods to real-life events, and according to the developers, much of the story was taken from journal entries of active duty Tier 1 operators. Coming out a little less than a month before the highly anticipated Black Ops 2, I think Warfighter was fighting an uphill battle on release. Let's face it, from 2007 to 2013, Call of Duty had audiences in a chokehold. Maybe even later than that, but I hopped off after Black Ops 2 and didn't look back for a few years. The only real competition they had was EA's own Battlefield, and even those sales paled in comparison to the Activision behemoth. Warfighter was not praised on release. Far from it, actually. This entry bombed hard in the eyes of the critics. Complaints about a confusing and lackluster campaign, unlikable characters, and poor performance on the 7th generation of consoles were among the many reasons given for low scores almost across the board. Are these complaints justified? Well, I can't speak on the console performance because I played it on PC. However, Medal of Honor Warfighter's story is undeniably convoluted, with missions presented out of order, making it challenging to follow the narrative at times. To make sense of it all, I pieced together a timeline of the missions and cutscenes. What started as a simple game of connected dots very quickly turned into me scratching my head and loudly exclaiming, "When the fuck did this take place?" I'm not alone either. I found an error that suggests even the developers had a tough time keeping track. So, does Warfighter deserve the Medal of Honor, or should this game be dishonorably discharged into a dumpster? Let's find out. Unintended Consequences is both the first mission of the game and the first on the timeline. Taking place 8 weeks ago, which is a choice that I dislike, we have no point of reference here. 8 weeks ago from what? I understand the problem that they had wanting to tell a non-linear narrative, but this isn't the best solution. There are tons of ways to tell non-linear stories in a way that the audience can easily follow along, and I'm not a fan of the way Danger Close Games executed this. What I am a fan of is how visually impressive this game looks. Right from the get-go, the Frostbite 2 engine looks fantastic. I'm not going to pretend to understand lighting technology, but how does this look better than some shooters that are coming out today? The mission starts with Preacher and Mother surfacing near a shipment yard in Pakistan. Tasked with destroying a truck in what is referred to as routine demolition, we get this very sudden cut to gameplay as we assassinate one guard and make our way up to the target. This isn't the cleanest transition in the history of gaming, but it was still neat. I'll be honest, I didn't really get much further than this on my first playthrough. There was something about the controls that just felt off, but I didn't really notice that as much this time. Like I said, there's something about playing games back to back that really fucks with me. I spent a lot of time during this section adjusting settings and tweaking things until the gameplay felt good. I'm still a bit annoyed that the game doesn't have an FOV slider. I just got over it. After planting the explosive and watching the truck obliviously drive into the shipment yard, we detonate the truck and get surprised when a second explosion erupts, causing chaos and bringing down a crane.
What the fuck? Get down!
At this point, the game already set expectations. These aren't going to be the grounded missions we were used to in 2010. Warfighter's campaign takes a sharp turn into, dare I say, modern warfare territory. We then jump ahead those 8 weeks to the present day, where Preacher is speaking with his wife Lena on the phone. It's clear that they're having some marital problems, and this will be a persisting subplot. There are two narratives at work here. There's the Warfighter campaign, full of terrorists, badass elite soldiers, car chases, and explosions. Then there's the story of family, and the sacrifices that they make. It's pretty clear that Preacher cares about his wife and daughter, but his career path is demanding. This is a reflection of the real struggles that military families go through, and it was nice to see a more human side of these characters. This direction reminded me a lot of the campaign in Call of Duty World War II. Going back 8 weeks again, we get another cutscene where fan favorite Dusty returns as the mission handler. A lot of his cutscenes are just there to give exposition on the military side of the campaign. Mother and Dusty discuss the explosion, and it's revealed that they may have stumbled upon something big. Dusty wants them to remain close by and try to get more intel. Dusty mentions having someone on the inside, but they've gone dark. In the next mission, we take control of Argyros, the inside guy, and run a training course. This is an interesting twist on the training course formula, playing the standard obstacle course but as an enemy. I'm not typically a fan of tutorials that feel like tutorials, but at least this contributes a bit to the story. I left this mission off the timeline because there really aren't any indicators as to when it takes place. It also really doesn't matter. But this is where we learn about the new leaning mechanics. In Medal of Honor 2010, the player can press Q and E to lean to the left and the right. This is a neat mechanic that is often absent in modern FPS games, mostly due to limited input on console controllers. This new variation of the mechanic uses the Alt and movement keys, allowing the player to peek around or over cover. It's a neat interpretation, but there is a slight drawback. While leaning, you can no longer strafe. I found that extremely limiting and honestly a little frustrating at times. The next cutscene is where things get a little confusing. Mother and Dusty are speaking about the explosion as if it had just happened, almost like an alternate cut of their previous conversation. Dusty mentions a cell phone and gives more exposition on the explosion. Based on the timeline, this cutscene takes place about a week before present day. I'm not sure why they decided to jump so far ahead with this cutscene, but it leads right into the next mission. Shore Leave is the third mission and the fifth on the timeline. Yeah, we jumped from here to here. Keep up. Voodoo is leading Task Force Mako on an assault into Somalia. Remember when Somalia had a pirate problem? Well, Task Force Mako is here to put a stop to it. You take control of another Task Force Mako member, Stump, in the first actual mission of the game. This mission sees the return of everything I loved about Medal of Honor 2010. Intense gunfights, relatively competent AI, and gameplay variety. We get everything from your run-of-the-mill FPS action to remote control robots. and probably one of the coolest stationary sniping sequences I've played since All Gillied Up. During Shore Leave, the game introduces a dynamic breaching mechanic. It's neat, but I don't really understand why they put time into developing this. You unlock different types of door breaching methods by getting headshots during a breach. The thing is though, they don't really change anything, other than the animation that plays during a breach. So they're basically just cosmetics? It's neat, but I think they could have invested the development time into polishing up other parts of the game. I don't know, I'm indifferent to it. Another gameplay change comes in the form of enemy weapons. In previous Medal of Honor games, and pretty much any first-person shooter if I'm being honest, if you kill an enemy, you're able to pick up their gun. It's a staple mechanic. But in Warfighter, they made some tweaks to adhere to their goal for realism. You can pick up enemy weapons, but you don't exchange them for your own. You just holster your weapons and pick up another. Once that gun is out of ammo, or you switch weapons, you just drop that gun on the ground. I think the main reason that you would want to pick up an enemy's gun is because you ran out of ammo, and this game already solved that problem, so I guess it makes sense. We jump back to the present where we get a follow-up on the previous cutscene. Preacher and Lena are still trying to work things out, but it seems like she's done with him. Then there's a section that doesn't really make sense being out of order. Preacher sees a character and recognizes him, and then there's a train explosion. I would tell you what the hell just happened, but the game doesn't want you to know yet for some reason, so we'll just wait. Now, did you know what was missing from the last game? One little element that prevented the game from reaching its full potential? If you thought urban city car chases, you'd be oddly right. How did you guess that? Warfighter introduces not only the ability to drive, but the ability to drive like a badass through the streets of Pakistan while in a high-speed chase. But before we get into the mechanics, did you notice that? What the hell is Task Force Blackbird? I thought Preacher was a part of Task Force Mako. Surely the developers didn't accidentally add the wrong text to the beginning of this mission that takes place... Oh, look at that. Number 2 on the timeline. Show this to the next person who tells you the game isn't hard to follow. The dev team couldn't even keep up. At least they could program damn good driving mechanics. When I talked about breaking up levels with variety, this is exactly what I mean. Not only is Preacher a trained killer, but he's also a part of the family. Jokes aside, the driving in this game was better than the driving in the Fast and Furious game. How did they manage that? Might have to do with the fact that EA also makes Need for Speed. At the end of the mission, we finally understand what Dusty was talking about when he mentioned a cell phone. Why are these cutscenes so out of order? I don't understand. After the explosion at the train station, Preacher is taken to the hospital. Mother visits him and lets him know that Lena and Bella missed their train and are alive. This was a pretty emotional moment. I really thought that guy just lost his family. And then I saw his family, and never mind. I'm not going to make fun of the Uncanny Valley child. I'm above that. Changing Tides and Rip Current are consecutive missions that explain why Mother and Preacher were discharged from the Navy. While in the Philippines, they assist NAVSOG, a group of Tier 1 operators equivalent to the Navy SEALs, with a hostage situation. They report to General Barrera, who is responsible for overseeing the mission, and in his haste to take credit for the killing of a high-valued target, Tiger 12 is rushed into taking a shot that only wounded the target. Following that poor judgment call, NAVSOG stops following orders and looks to Mother for direction. This results in the General using his influence to force Preacher and Mother out of the Navy. I'm not sure why it is sort of implied that they are discharged for the explosion in a previous cutscene, but this appears to be the actual reason. This mission is full of incredible environments and even segments where you drive a boat while trying to escape. These missions together were a pretty great time, and that gets us caught up to the present day. Finally establishing Task Force Blackbird after accidentally introducing it 2 missions prior. A big part of this game was how much of it was pulled from reality. Warfighter is littered with references to real-life operations and events, and the most obvious one is the hijacking of the Maersk, Alabama. Many people know this as the story of Captain Phillips thanks to the 2013 blockbuster starring Tom Hanks. The mission hat trick puts you in control of one of 3 Navy SEALs that took simultaneous shots to eliminate the 3 pirates holding Captain Phillips hostage. Finding Faraz picks up where the final cutscene in Medal of Honor 2010 ended. Preacher and a new character, Ajeb, scope out the streets for an arms dealer named Faraz. Mother is waiting just up the street with a vehicle to quickly secure him, but Faraz gets suspicious and runs. This mission is one of the few foot chases in the game, and for some reason, IGN said the game had too many. This is the only one, I think. I'm pretty sure this is the only foot chase, so I don't know what the hell that guy was on about. He also called Preacher a dude bro. How are you going to review a game and just say the dumbest fucking thing imaginable? Sorry. Anyway, just before Faraz can give away too much information, he's taken out by a sniper, but he does manage to give one lead, a man named Hassan in Dubai. Connect the Dots shifts back to Stump, where Task Force Mako discovers the training facility from the earlier mission. They find a cache of explosives, but a lot of it appears to be missing, and they call in airstrikes to destroy the rest of it. Meanwhile, in Dubai, Preacher and Mother kidnap Hassan, who appears to have much more protection than expected. Preacher plays a game of cat and mouse with Hassan's own personal militia on the streets of Dubai in another really fun car mission. Unfortunately, they don't get away and are rammed by an SUV and captured by Saad al-Din, who we saw earlier. Old Friends is a mission that I saw a lot of discussion about online. The mission is reported to take place in Sarajevo, Bosnia. The only issue is that the town is depicted as being much more destroyed and war-torn than it is in real life around the time this game takes place. I'm not sure if this was an error on the developer's part, but some people have noted that this may actually be another Bosnian town called Mostar. There's not a lot much more to say about this mission, except for this weird segment that takes place in the former Olympic Stadium or something like that, where I pushed too far ahead and enemies were just spawning in front of me. Oh wait, this mission ends with another foot chase. Okay, there's 2, alright? Next we get a cutscene where Dusty informs Lena that Preacher had been captured, and we transition to Mother and Preacher being interrogated by Saad al-Din. We get some background on the characters as we see a scene of Preacher and Mother out to lunch with their wives. These types of scenes are specifically what I'm talking about when I say this campaign reminds me a lot of Call of Duty World War II, which actually came out 5 years later. I really like the direction they took with these cutscenes. We get a heartfelt moment between Lena and Mother's wife before we cut back to the interrogation. Now, I spoiled this moment for myself by reading ahead on the wiki while researching my last Medal of Honor video, but Mother being executed the way that he is just caught me off guard still. It's such a cold way to kill off one of the main characters, and I have to say it was extremely effective. I felt like I was going through the same emotions that Preacher was at the moment. Then, in one of the best moments of misdirection, Task Force Mako lands on a ship to execute a mission, only to realize there are a lot of enemy combatant bodies everywhere. They fight their way to the bridge and breach it, only to find Preacher and a badly beaten Saad al-Din. Saad al-Din? Saad al-Din. We go back in time 1 hour and play through a stealth segment where Preacher systematically executes everyone on his way to Saad al-Din. This is probably my favorite mission in the entire game. It's the only mission where you default to a pistol and have no allies to support you. You are completely on your own in what feels like a neat return to form for the series. The final mission brings the whole gang together for an assault on the cleric's compound, and one final large-scale battle to send the campaign off with a bang. Not counting the VR title that was released in 2020, Medal of Honor Warfighter is the last entry in the series. For a franchise that was responsible for starting the World War II FPS boom, it's a shame that it had to end the way that it did. The implication that this entry was so bad that EA cut their losses and went all in on Battlefield seems kind of simplified to me. It's like saying E.T. was solely responsible for the video game crash of 1983. We all know the real culprit. But what I'm trying to say here is that there are a lot of factors that led to Medal of Honor being shelved, and poor sales was just a part of it. I do think that EA bit off a bit more than they could chew while trying to compete with Activision and their assembly line of Call of Duty titles. I think the public was getting a bit fatigued as well. I recall this being around the time I stopped playing Call of Duty and that genre of FPS game altogether. Not for any particular reason, I was just playing other stuff. Trends in gaming come and go all the time, and it's a real shame that Medal of Honor seemed to just be at the tail end of this one. Despite this being the game that quote-unquote killed Medal of Honor, it's not a bad game. It has a short campaign, but an impactful one. The developers wanted to tell a specific kind of story, and while there were some mistakes made along the way, I respect that they tried to do something different. Where Medal of Honor 2010 felt like a war documentary, Warfighter feels like a spy thriller adaptation of that source material, and I really like that. So there. I hope the Medal of Honor fans in my comment section are happy. I gave Warfighter a chance, and I actually enjoyed it. Let me know what other games you'd like me to talk about. I love suggestions and getting to experience these titles that I might have overlooked. That's probably my favorite part about making these videos. The support I've gotten on these recently has been incredible, and I want to thank every single person who's watching this, whether you've made it this far or not. Also, go play Warfighter if you haven't. The world is lying to you. Thanks for watching.